felt like a children's show was hiding something? Deeper, what if a forgotten prophecy wasn't just part of the plot, but a real warning disguised as fiction? Buried inside Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds lies a pattern, a code, and a countdown. 5 dragons, 5 seals, and a 6th that was never meant to return. But it's waking up. From ancient ruins in Japan to encrypted forums long deleted, the signs are aligning. The prophecy speaks of memory, of cycles, of something buried beneath the surface of our world. And on March 21st, 2026, everything may change. This isn't just a fan theory. It's an investigation into what fiction remembers. And what we've all forgotten. The dragons aren't coming. They're already here. Stay with us before the last lock opens. I never believed in prophecies. Not really. Not the kind you find scribbled on ancient stone tablets, nor the ones whispered by cloaked figures in backroom forums. But that changed one night in early November, when I stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see. Something buried under years of fan theories, card game mechanics, and anime episodes. It started, oddly enough, with a children's trading card game. I had been researching the cultural phenomena behind early 2000s media franchises Digimon, UGI. Oh, tracing their roots in Eastern spirituality, Western mysticism, and corporate storytelling. It was supposed to be a simple piece, how Japanese animation redefined modern myth. But Yu-Gi-Oh! Was different. The further I dug into it, the more the show's 5th iteration, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, stood out. Unlike its predecessors, 5Ds didn't just feature duels. It spoke of an ancient war, of dragons bound to chosen warriors, of civilizations lost beneath a modern skyline, of signs, of fate. One name kept appearing in forums, in old production notes, even in half-translated Japanese message boards. The Ancient Prophecy. At first, I assumed it referred to a booster pack, a product, release from 2009, but the repetition felt ... off. Some users spoke of it like a real document. Others posted fragments of original text, strange phrases allegedly cut from the anime, phrases that didn't match any subtitles or transcripts. One in particular lodged itself in my head. 5 shall awaken when the stars scream. Bound by flesh, led by fate, marked by dragons. 1 shall fall, 1 shall betray. The door will open. It had that fake mystic feel you see in online fan fiction, until I cross-checked the Japanese. It wasn't a direct quote, but a compressed fusion of several scattered lines from the original broadcast version of 5Ds, lines that were edited or removed entirely from international versions. Curiosity shifted to obsession. I started mapping appearances of these prophecy fragments across the series, episode by episode. There were patterns, visual symbols, recurring numbers, astronomical references. One especially strange moment. Episode 24. A shot lasting less than 3 seconds shows an ancient mural hidden inside a cave, half-lit. Most viewers barely notice it, but the carvings? They're not fantasy glyphs. They're a modified Mesoamerican symbol, eerily close to the real-world Mayan glyph for return. That's when I contacted a friend, a semi-retired symbologist, Dr. K. Hanamura, based in Kyoto. I sent him the screenshot. He replied with 2 words: "This is not a coincidence." Hanamura, skeptical of all things fan culture, was struck by how specific the carving was. "It's based on something," he said, "but not from mainstream history. It feels constructed. Artificial myth. Someone stitched together existing mythologies to invent a new one, and they knew exactly what they were doing." That's when the real question hit me. Why? Why would an animated series aimed at teenagers go to such lengths to build a fake prophecy from pieces of real ones? And more importantly, were they just creating a story, or revealing something hidden in plain sight. Over the next few weeks, I collected more fragments, both from within the show and from strange, now-deleted fan sites that claim to have seen original production notes from Studio Gallop. One site archived what it called the full translation of the Dragon Chronicle, allegedly an internal guide used by the writers. Of course, no official source ever confirmed its existence. But this passage from the supposed chronicle stood out. The signers are not characters, they are archetypes. The 5 exist because they must. Every age rediscovers them. When the sky turns black over the twin spires and the earth's heart trembles, they will emerge again, not in Neo Domino, but here. That last line, not in Neo Domino, but here. What did that mean? Here, where? Earth, our world. I stared at the text for hours. The phrasing was specific. Chilling. Was this just brilliant world building or a blurred mirror held up to reality? At this point, I began to wonder if this was just a case of collective over-imagination, fans seeing patterns where none exist. But the more I pulled the thread, the more I realized. The ancient prophecy may have started as fiction, but it was built like a code, a living myth crafted not just to entertain, but to warn or remember. And someone didn't want it remembered, because 2 days later, one of the oldest fan forums that hosted the full prophecy file disappeared. Domain expired. Archive wiped. That was the night I booked a one-way ticket to Tokyo. Because if the prophecy wasn't just a marketing stunt, I needed to know what else was buried beneath the game, and who had buried it. By the time I landed in Tokyo, the lines between narrative and reality had already started to blur. I wasn't chasing a children's show anymore. I was chasing a pattern, fragments of something ancient, embedded within a modern mythos, and for reasons I couldn't yet explain, deliberately obscured. I had 3 names and 2 places. The names Takahashi Okabe, and a former assistant writer known only by the online alias Kiru, now disappeared from all public platforms. The place is Studio Gallop's former animation office in Suginami and an archive room in Shinjuku National Library, known for housing Japanese pop cultural media donations. I started with the library. Inside, buried in a corner near the microfilm station, was a faded print booklet labeled only Yokwai Wudi's Godzal Zihao, UGIO, UDS, Structure and Symbols. It was an internal guide, an early design draft never meant for public release. It contained dozens of handwritten notes, redacted paragraphs, sketches, not of cards or monsters, but of star constellations, ley lines, and spiritual diagrams. Some looked shockingly similar to Tibetan mandalas, others more like alchemical wheels from medieval Europe. Page 27 was marked with a crimson sticker. It held no images, just a single passage, underlined 3 times in black ink. 5 points of convergence, 5 vessels, 5 wounds. In the age of steel wheels. And sky towers, they shall awaken, unaware of their role until the moment of fracture. Watch the north, it begins there. That line, 5 vessels. In the show, they're the 5 signers. Chosen individuals, each marked with a dragon sigil, connected to a legendary beast representing a cosmic force. But this document spoke of them less as characters, more as containers. Vessels of an ancient memory recurring throughout human history in different forms. Another note scrawled in the margin in a different hand read, "The dragons are keys, not guardians, locks." I took a picture. That night, I started mapping things out. Episode titles, plot arcs, real-world astronomical alignments on the dates episodes aired. It was ridiculous, yet it wasn't. Patterns emerged. The show referenced a solar eclipse during the climax of the Dark Signer arc. Fans dismissed it as symbolic. But the episode aired just 2 days before a real total eclipse that passed over parts of the Pacific, including Japan. Coincidence? Maybe. But when I revisited a piece of fan-translated dialogue allegedly cut from the international version of episode 51, my doubts deepened. The antagonist whispers, "They think this is a game." But this story was written in blood, in cycles. 5 rise, 1 betrays, 1 vanishes, and the world turns again. It echoed the mysterious phrase I had seen weeks earlier. By now, my view of the series had completely transformed. It wasn't just an anime. It was a modern retelling of something older, a remnant, a riddle. To understand it, I had to dive into the source. The true ancient prophecy, if such a text ever existed, would need to have roots in real mythology. I reached out again to Dr. Hanamura, who now agreed to meet me in person. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, tucked beneath a train overpass. I showed him the photo of the library document. He nodded, slowly. "This part here," he said, tapping the line about the vessels, "matches an old Japanese creation myth. Aim no Kagesio, the star god who was split into 5 shards and scattered across the sky. It's not popular anymore, but someone did their homework." He sipped his tea, then added, "You realize what this means, don't you? These writers weren't just borrowing mythology. They were reconstructing it, synthesizing fragments from East and West, creating a living story, one that feels familiar because it's built from the bones of things we've forgotten." My hands were trembling slightly. I didn't want to admit it, but the deeper I went, the less this felt like a fandom theory. It was becoming personal. The final thread came from the last known post of the mysterious writer Kiru, found on a now-archived blog. It was dated February 12, 2010. The title was a single line. "The prophecy is incomplete." The post itself was brief, but haunting. We were told to cut 28 seconds of footage from episode 39. They said it was too suggestive, too real. But those seconds contained the original lines. The invocation, the one where he names the 5th. I tried to keep a copy. I failed, but it's not gone. Pieces of it remain, scattered, in data, in cards, in code. Someone will find them. Someone has to. I stared at the post for a long time. Then, for no clear reason, I thought of a card I hadn't seen in years. Ancient Fairy Dragon. Number 5. The Forgotten One. Not the most powerful, not the most iconic. But in the show, she was the keeper of the forgotten world. The one who lived underground. Buried? I looked again at that fan-translated line. 5 rise, 1 vanishes. What if it wasn't poetic? What if something really was missing? If so, then the prophecy isn't just a myth. It's a puzzle. I was only beginning to see how many pieces had been stolen. As the days in Tokyo passed, I began to uncover more. Not from official sources, but from the cracks between them. It became clear. This wasn't just an anime. It was a window. Not into an imagined world, but into a much darker, hidden reality. I had been right to dig deeper. The truth was buried under layers of carefully constructed fiction, and the prophecy. It was far more than a plot device. But the more I searched, the more I found, and the closer I came to discovering something dangerous. I began revisiting old episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, paying close attention to scenes I had once written off as filler. Episode 24, as I mentioned earlier, contained a strange visual clue, an ancient mural depicting a celestial event. It was a short clip, barely noticeable, and yet it held an astronomical alignment. The sun and moon positioned exactly as they would be during an upcoming total lunar eclipse. The timing wasn't coincidental. Then there was the missing footage, the one that had been cut from episode 39. Fans had speculated about its loss for years, and I was no different. But now, I was obsessed. This episode was pivotal in the series' plot, yet there was a gap, a moment lost to time. The scene was rumored to contain a line where one of the central characters, the antagonist recites something that would change everything. Something about the fifth signer, the one who is always meant to vanish. But the more I looked into this, the more I came to realize that this missing scene wasn't just cut for narrative pacing. It was deliberately erased. Fan forums had long argued that this segment was too dark for a children's show, and many assumed that it was removed in post-production to make the show more palatable to younger audiences. But as I dug deeper into the metadata and production leaks, I discovered something far more unsettling. One anonymous source claimed that the missing footage didn't just contain dialogue. It was tied to a real-world event. The fifth signer. The one destined to vanish. The real-world parallel. The 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan. This theory had been circulating in underground circles, but it was until I visited the local studio archives that I began to understand the chilling connection. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds had aired in 2008. But the writers had always been obsessed with the notion of destiny. And the show's final arc seemed to be eerily predictive, not just of fantasy, but of something very real. Fans had speculated that one of the characters, an enigmatic figure who was bound to betray everyone, Jack Atlas, might represent the fall of an entire civilization. The theory gained more traction as I found more information about the prophecy's complete version on forums that had once been publicly accessible. Apparently, the missing footage contained not just the line about the fifth signer, but something far more esoteric, an earthquake symbol repeated 3 times, as though referencing a series of catastrophic events leading to destruction. It was too close to reality to ignore. When the first pieced together the real-world dates, the timeline grew impossible to dismiss. The lunar eclipse mentioned in the show, which was supposed to signify the rise of the Five, happened just a few months before. The Fukushima disaster in Japan, a literal and metaphorical rupture in the world's foundation. The prophecy spoke of a fracture, of the earth trembling, and it wasn't just a metaphor anymore. Dr. Hanamura had warned me that I might be crossing into dangerous territory. The deeper I went, the more I felt like I was drawing closer to something that wasn't meant to be found. At this point, my investigation shifted. The search for the ancient prophecy was no longer about fiction and myth. It had become about history and about the strange intersection between the two. The characters of Yu-Gi-Oh! Weren't just figments of some writer's imagination. They were woven into the very fabric of our reality, mirroring events that had already happened and perhaps even predicting the future. But it wasn't just the show's characters that were significant. It was the symbols themselves. I revisited the Earthbound Immortals, the mysterious creatures featured in 5Ds. These were no ordinary monsters. They were symbols of ancient gods, each representing an elemental force tied to the planet's life cycle. In the show, the Earthbound Immortals were bound to specific geographical locations, places where great disasters had occurred, or were believed to be linked to world-changing events. I began to see the patterns more clearly. The 5 dragons, the 5 who will rise. Each has a connection to the elements. Each has a role in the great turning of the wheel. It was starting to look less like an anime and more like a coded message from the past, one that was written in parallel with the world's own story. I wasn't just watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore. I was observing a hidden narrative, a web of fate, drawing the strings of reality and myth together. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized this wasn't a story of the past. It was a prophecy of the future. I returned to the studio grounds in Sujinami the next day. Studio Gallop no longer operated from the building where Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds was animated. It was a concrete husk now, sold off to a media tech company that had no idea what stories were born in its walls. But the building manager, a man in his 60s with a soft voice and fading memory, still remembered the animators with the long nights. I asked him cautiously if he ever heard anything about symbols or mythology during those production years. He didn't answer directly, but after a moment, he said something odd. They used to burn incense. That struck me as strange. Every week, they'd say it was for continuity, but it always smelled like a funeral. The deeper I went, the more I realized. The people who made 5Ds weren't just animating a myth. They were participating in it. I had managed to retrieve a partial list of staff from a leaked internal memo archived on a now-defunct site. Most names were expected. Storyboard artists, voice actors, technical leads. One stood out. A credit listed only in the early drafts of the production notes. Ryuji Kirisu, myth consultant, a position that never appeared in final credits. He had worked on exactly 13 episodes, all of them connected to the Signers, the Earthbound Immortals, or the Prophecy arc. After that, his name disappeared entirely. I tried to find records of him, social media, interviews, academic publications. Nothing. It was as if he had been erased. But one comment on an obscure anime board dated back to 2011 mentioned him. Kurasusan said something weird to us during the 5Ds wrap dinner. He told us that the dragons weren't invented. He said they were recovered, that they were older than fiction. Then he got very quiet and said, "Be careful. They don't like being seen. They, the dragons, the entities behind the myth." Was he just playing a part? Or did he believe what he was saying? The trail led me next to an underground zine published in the late 90s, long before 5Ds aired. The zine, titled Kosei no Uroboros, was a collage of hand-typed theories, images, and esoteric diagrams. Issue 5 was entirely dedicated to something called the 5 markers. According to the zine, these were pre-modern symbols found in ruins across 5 continents, always in the same arrangement: left spiral, arched serpent, wings. They were usually dismissed as forgeries or vandalism. But in 5Ds, these became the exact shapes of the Signers' dragon marks. The zine author, using the pseudonym J.K., theorized that these 5 symbols were part of a language older than writing, a way to mark chosen vessels across different ages. Sound familiar? In the series, the Signers inherit their marks as if by destiny. They don't choose them. The marks appear, glowing during times of crisis. The implication: these symbols activate only when a larger force is trying to repair or perhaps reboot the world. And according to J.K., they were last activated in 1939, days before the outbreak of World War II. That's when I found something I wasn't supposed to see. A former intern from the Studio Gallup days, username redacted, account deleted, had archived what he called draft board meetings. In his private notes, there, tucked in an unlisted paste bin, was this line: "We're not telling a new story. We're remembering an old one. The dragons, the fall, the betrayal. The 5th mark, lost. It happens again and again." That's the point. This wasn't just about 5 teenagers on motorcycles dueling with cards. This was a cycle, something buried deep in our collective memory, disguised as fantasy. The prophecy wasn't linear. It was a loop. Each time it completed, the world changed, subtly or violently. The 5 rise, 1 falls, 1 betrays, and the system resets. And if that was true, we were nearing another reset. The clues were mounting. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, 5 specific dragons represent the 5 Signers. 1. Ancient Fairy Dragon was banned in tournaments for years. The only one of the 5 to be removed from competitive play. The in-universe reason: she was betrayed, sealed away. In reality, her removal was due to balance issues. But in light of everything else, it felt symbolic. The Forgotten Dragon, the one who lived underground, the one who knew something. That night, I went through every frame of episode 75. That's when I saw it. A 3-second clip, a flash during a summoning animation, something that looked like a star map overlaid with runes. I screenshotted it, adjusted the exposure, and aligned it with real star charts. It wasn't fantasy. It was astronomical, a real alignment. The stars shown would form that exact pattern on March 21st, 2026, just under a year from now. If the prophecy was real, if it was a cycle, then that S when it would begin again. Unless it already has. I didn't sleep the night I found the alignment date. I had it burned into my mind. March 21st, 2026. I kept circling it, wondering, was it the beginning, the end, or something subtler, stranger? Back in my hotel room, I pinned every clue to a single wall. Character arcs, real-world disasters, forum posts, obscure manga panels, draft annotations. It looked like a conspiracy board, the kind you'd laugh at in movies. But standing there, I wasn't laughing. Because piece by piece, the fiction was aligning with reality. The dragons, the locks, as the internal notes described them, weren't just monsters in a game, they were containers. And their awakening was meant to happen only when a balance was broken. A fracture in the world's rhythm. I turned back to the earthbound immortals. Their very name, Di-Fu-Shan, literally translates to earthbound gods. Entities trapped below the surface. In lore, they were sealed beneath geographic points tied to spiritual rot, ruins, battlegrounds, disaster sites. In the anime, they emerged through shadows and chaos. But what disturbed me most was a line from an early character concept draft. The gods are not evil, they are corrective. They rise when the planet cannot breathe. Corrective? Like a virus when the system fails. Like fire in a forest that's grown to dry. Could these symbols, these dragons, gods, monsters, be metaphors for planetary defense mechanisms? If so, what exactly were they correcting? I shifted my focus to global events. In the last 5 years alone, we've seen atmospheric disturbances, magnetic field fluctuations, mass animal migrations in patterns unseen in recorded history. Scientists have offered explanations. Climate shifts, pollution, solar cycles. But one anomaly stood out. A newly mapped gravitational oscillation detected under the Pacific Plate. First logged in late 2023, barely reported. Unexplained, the data pattern. A 5-point radial pulse. It repeated every 21 hours. A geologist on a niche podcast mentioned it in passing, calling it the breath of the abyss. Most of his colleagues dismissed it. But when I overlaid the pulse with the layout of the 5 dragon sigils from the show, it matched almost perfectly. Too perfectly. I tried to shake the feeling off. Coincidences? That's all. But that word had become fragile, thin. That night, I received an encrypted message from a burner account. No greeting, no context. Just a video file named Kiru_last, MKV. My pulse quickened. The video showed an old CRT monitor flickering in a dark room. A single line of text scrolled across the screen. You are looking in the wrong direction. The 5th doesn't vanish. The 5th remembers. The footage cut to static, then flickered into frames from a forgotten episode. Number 52. But it wasn't the version that aired. This one had a voiceover. Low, slowed down. I couldn't make out all the words, but one sentence came through clearly. There is no chosen, only awakeners. And once you wake them, you cannot put them back to sleep. I slammed my laptop shut. Was this fan-made? It's a hoax. But the voice, it matched the original Japanese voice actor's cadence. It was authentic. And the file metadata contained a cryptic coordinate string. Somewhere in the mountains of Kumano, Japan. A region known for its temples. And for its history of being a thin place between worlds in Shinto and Buddhist traditions alike. I checked the date. March 21st, 2026. The alignment fell during the spring equinox, one of the most sacred dates in solar tradition across nearly every ancient culture. It wasn't just a narrative arc. It was a ritual clock, and it was ticking. Suddenly, the prophecy no longer seemed like a myth hiding in fiction. It felt like a warning, a map, a countdown. And the more I followed it, the more I became aware of one thing. Someone else was following it too. Encrypted forums I had used weeks earlier were now gone. Posts deleted. Entire user accounts wiped. People who had shared early production materials were silent or had disappeared from the web entirely. At first, I thought it was simple attrition, old users moving on. But now I wasn't so sure. A final thread was sent to me, anonymously. A scan of a handwritten note dated 2007, signed only with a scribbled RK. It read, "We thought we were writing a show, but it started writing back. Whatever is buried under the story, it remembers. When the fifth wakes, the sky will turn, the stars will realign, and the locks will open. One last time." I turned off my phone. I backed up my notes. I bought a ticket to Kumano, because now this was no longer a story about Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, this was about what happens when the forgotten tries to return, and whether we are ready to face what we've buried. Kumano greeted me with silence. Not the kind of silence you find in empty rooms or abandoned buildings, but the vast, ancient quiet that only forests can hold. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you are being watched, not by eyes, but by memory. Nestled among the lush mountains of the Kii Peninsula, Kumano is revered in Japanese spiritual tradition. It is the heart of the Kumano Kodo, an ancient network of pilgrimage routes that once carried emperors and ascetics alike to the land of the gods. But I wasn't here for temples or heritage. I was here for coordinates. The numbers embedded in the video led to a point just beyond the main path, not on the tourist maps, not listed in any local guide. I hiked for hours, the terrain growing more difficult with each step. Moss clung to my boots. The forest canopy dimmed the sun to a dim green haze. Then I saw it. A stone marker, weathered and cracked, half swallowed by vines. Carved into its surface, barely visible, were 5 sigils. I recognized them instantly. The dragon marks. They were older here. Rough, chiseled by hand, long before animation cells or television screens. These weren't inspired by the show. These predated it. I pushed forward, heart pounding. Beyond the marker, the trail narrowed into a ravine. At the bottom lay the remains of what might have once been a shrine. Stone foundations, splintered beams, and in the center, a well. Circular, deep, sealed with rusted iron bars, now partially collapsed. On the stone lip, another carving Wu, Dame Air. One sleeps. One sleeps, one forgets. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, a ringing in my ears. The feeling you get when a storm is about to break. Though the air was still, I set up my camera. I documented everything. The symbols, the sight, the sound, or the lack of it. The forest had gone completely silent, and then something happened. I didn't hallucinate. I didn't dream. I know what I saw. As the sun reached its apex, a shadow moved across the well, against the direction of the sun. A cold wind swept through the trees, and for a split second, I heard a sound from the pit below. It wasn't wind, it was a voice. Not in any language I knew, but full of rhythm. Chant-like, not angry, more like remembering something, like singing the lyrics to a song long buried. I leaned over the well, and carved into the stone beneath the iron gate was one final sigil. One I hadn't seen in the show or any of the archives. It was the 6th mark, not a dragon, not a god, but a shape more human. A spiral enclosed by 2 hands, holding something in, or trying to. I stumbled back. Something was wrong. Something had shifted. As I turned to leave, I saw a figure, not close, but standing on the ridge above the shrine, dressed in black. Motionless. Watching, I didn't wait. I ran. Back in the town, I asked an old monk at the Kumano Hangu Taisha shrine if he had ever heard stories of 5 seals or dragon stones. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "What sleeps beneath is not to be called." I asked him what that meant. He replied, "Only once before, in the time of storms, did the seals weaken. The earth bled, and many forgot. It would say nothing more." That night, I reviewed the footage. The symbols were clear, the well unmistakable. But the figure on the ridge wasn't there. Frame by frame, I checked. No silhouette, no black coat. Nothing. Had it been real? A guardian? A warning? Or something else entirely? And yet, the feeling remained. I had seen something ancient. Not supernatural, not in the fantasy sense, but old in a way our minds are not built to process. Something that was encoded into story, into symbol, into the collective dreams of children through a television screen, softened just enough to be consumed without awakening what lies beneath. That is what the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's prophecy is. It's not fiction, it's containment. The dragons are not characters, they are functions. The signers are not heroes, they are roles. Repeating, resetting, remembering. The fifth doesn't vanish, the fifth returns. And when it does, the world must decide again. Will it remember or forget? It's been 3 months since I returned from Kumano. The footage I recorded, the carvings, the well, the chanting, is stored on 3 separate drives buried across 3 cities. Not because I'm afraid of being silenced, but because I finally understand something. The story was never mine to tell. It belonged to something older. Something that wrote itself into our collective imagination using whatever tools it could find. Ancient ruins, card games, animated series. And most of us never questioned it. Why would we? It was just fiction. But fiction is a safe word we use to hide from what we feel is real. Let me be clear. I don't believe there's a monster beneath the earth. Not in the way stories tell it. But I do believe this. There is a pattern, and the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's prophecy, the dragons, the cycle, the forgotten fifth, is a map of that pattern. A ritual told in modern language. Symbols standing in for events we've lived through before, and may be living through again. I began this journey chasing a piece of lost media. A single phrase, the ancient prophecy. A title for a card set. A background plotline. A marketing device. But what I found was a system of memory encoded through entertainment, waiting for the world to pay attention. Waiting for a moment. A date, a shift, a crack in the pattern. When it might rise again, and that moment is coming. Every 21 years, a minor alignment occurs between 5 key celestial bodies. An event known to some as a quintuple convergence. The next is scheduled precisely for March 21, 2026. The same date embedded in the animation. The same date marked beneath the shrine in Kumano. The same date the 5th mark is said to return. I've received no further messages from the accounts that contacted me. The forums are gone. The people who shared this journey have either vanished or fallen silent. But one last file reached me, unmarked and unsigned. It contained a single frame of static and a caption burned in the bottom corner. The dragons are not coming back. They are already here. They live in those who choose to remember. That's when I realized the prophecy was never about events. It was about awareness. About whether we will wake up or stay asleep. Just like the 5th. The ancient prophecy isn't a catastrophe to be feared. It's a mirror. A moment in which each generation must look at the symbols it inherits and decide, do we let them pass silently into commodified myth, or do we trace them back, through card packs, through episodes, through ruins and well-forgotten wells, and ask, what were we trying to say? Who were we trying to warn? Are we already too late? I'll end this investigation with one last observation. In Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, there is a moment when the protagonist, Yuze, is asked why he fights for a world that seems broken. He doesn't give a grand speech. He simply says, Because someone has to remember the light. The light, in this case, is not hope. It is memory, fragile, flickering, often buried. But it returns. Every time someone listens closely to what was dismissed as fiction. Every time someone dares to ask what lies behind the stories. Every time someone looks at a symbol and thinks, "I've seen this before." The prophecy lives on, not because it is real, but because you are. And now, so is your part in it. Thank you for following this story. If you ever find yourself near a forgotten symbol, a broken shrine, or a piece of fiction that feels older than it should, don't walk past it. Stop, listen, and remember. The fifth just waited, and perhaps it's waiting for you. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the symbols calling, the mystery unfolding, then don't let it end here. Like the video to help others discover what was hidden. Subscribe to the channel because this is just the beginning. There are more stories buried beneath the surface, and together, we'll keep digging.